But today we are celebrating Green Tara Press, and we have almost, I think we have the complete catalog of Green Tara books here today. So if you do not have, this is your chance, by the way, to get the whole catalog in one place with many of the authors that Green Tara has published here to sign the books for you. And so that's a rare opportunity, and I urge you not to leave here today without buying a Green Tara Press book. Buy them all if you don't already have them all. Buy the ones that you don't have. But please do support Green Tara, and all of the works that Green Tara has published are distinguished. They are worth your support. Thank you for listening, and please welcome Catherine Auman. Quick waters for Jerry Garcia, please nobody take it.
Thank you, Richard. It's really a dream come true to be here at Beyond Baroque. And I urge you to support them. I've been a supporter off and on since the 70s, so this is a great organization. I started Green Tara Press in 2013. I attended a workshop on self-publishing, and she said, you know, it'll look a whole lot better if you name the press something than just publish it yourself. So I thought that would be a great idea, so I started a press. And I couldn't come up with the name for it, and a friend of mine is a feminist, I'm a feminist, but she said, how about a female goddess? I thought, well, that's a great idea, so I was going through them and came upon Green Tara, and her, what she stands for really spoke to me, and I felt like we wanted to be a press that was up to some good in the world. There's plenty of people that want to write murder mysteries, and that's fine. I might want to read those myself, but we weren't going to do that ourselves. So this is our mission statement. Green Tara, the mother of liberation, is an enlightened female Buddha. So people think that Buddha was the guy's name, and actually Buddha is a state of consciousness that men or women can embody. So the Green Tara is an enlightened female Buddha in the tantric tradition of Tibet. She represents compassion, healing, and love. And it is believed that by focusing on her, we will develop these qualities in ourselves. Green Tara is the Buddha of enlightened activity, representing the virtues of success in work and achievements. At Green Tara Press, we are dedicated to publishing works that promote compassion, healing, and love, and awaken and inspire readers to enlightened action. We share the tantric vision that all is sacred. So I really feel so blessed by the authors that we have, all writing works that stand for healing and compassion and love in the world. So in some ways, this actually, Phoebe, if you don't mind, I'm going to change the order here, because a lot of my writing and a lot of the writers in this room have been helped and inspired and championed by Holly Prado. How many people are students of Holly Prado? And how many people are not? Okay, well that covers everybody. So, Holly Prado has been, let me read about her now. Is that okay if we do her work first? Sure. That's okay. So, Holly Prado was running a long time writer's workshop in Los Angeles. I don't know how long, Phoebe.
Well, I've been in it for over 20 years.
Over 20 years. So a lot of people come in and out, and she has had weekly, three or four groups a week. And so I met Margaret and Sandy in this group, and so I'll tell you the story about meeting them, but I want to start with Holly because Holly couldn't come today. But Holly has been, so I'll read her bio and I'll tell you, she's been a member of the LA literary community since the early 70s. Her 11th book, O Salt, O Desire in Hand, was published in 2013. Her books include poetry, prose poetry, a novel, 2 novellas. She's taught creative writing for many years, both privately and in the Masters of Professional Writing program at USC, where she taught poetry for 20 years. Holly Prado is the recipient of the 2013 George Drewry Smith Award for Outstanding Achievement in Poetry, presented annually by Beyond Baroque in honor of its founder, George Drewry Smith. The critic Robert Peters wrote, "Her writing is done metaphorically, speaking with a unique knife-sharp edge. Prado is both passionate and visionary. And Holly and Phoebe and James Cushing and Harry Northrup have a collaborative press called, of course I know the name of this press, Coinga Press, just pops out of my head right now, and they have been publishing for years, and in the writing groups, Holly would always share a piece of her writing, which would make us all feel like we needed to go back to the drawing board. It was so beautiful. And Holly at one point was working on a collection of short autobiographical pieces, and I said, Holly, please publish those. She said, well, my time with Coinga Press isn't coming up for a couple of years. So we were at a party, and I just threw out casually, like you would say, let's have lunch. I said, Holly, if you would ever like those published, Green Tar Press would be happy to publish them. And I just couldn't even dream that something so wonderful would happen. And she wrote back a few days later saying, I would love if you published my book. So we were honored to be able to publish Holly's book. And her colleague Phoebe is here to share part of her work for Green Tar Press. Thank you, Phoebe.
You're very welcome. Well, this is an unlooked for pleasure to read this. I love this book, and I'll tell you something about this. Holly, when she started these stories, they're little snippets from her life, and what she said was something has to happen. That was her one rule. There has to be something actually going on, something happened that she's going to be writing about in each of them. And they're wonderful, and more than one person who has read this book has said to me, I want to write a book like that. So if you ever want a book that's going to make you want to write, read this, because they make you want to write a book about your life, and they're wonderful. And I'm going to read one called Chagall, which is the story of her reaction to seeing a Chagall painting on a trip to Europe. Now, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The friends I was traveling with had scattered to other parts of the museum. I had the room to myself as I stood in front of a woman sleeping, floating, her arm flung above her head, sustained by an oval womb-like background of deepest reddish pink. A donkey merges with this background, and to the right, outside the cocoon, stands an angel protector. I burst into tears. The woman's restfulness, her luscious sensuality, the tenderness with which she, the animal, the angel, had been painted, art as sacred love. I was shocked at the force of my tears once they'd begun. They didn't stop until I was absorbed in Chagall's Song of Songs series on the walls. All the donkeys, lovers, winged creatures, large avian presences. I stared and wept. In one painting, a hand, fingers gently curved, reaches toward a crescent moon with the most delicate desire imaginable. In another, the heads of two lovers become part of the whole world, not dominating it, but inhabiting it as part of a fabulous whole that includes a fat, multicolored sun nourishing it all. I'd been away from home for weeks. I wasn't even sure what home meant to me now, but here I was in Nice, France, at the Musée National Massage Biblique Marc Chagall. This was August 1976. I'd become a writer in the past 6 years. I'd see 2 books of mine published when I got back to Los Angeles. This surprised me. I had no expectations involving writing, especially poetry. Everything surprised me about this time in my life. My musician husband suddenly left me in 1971. I wasn't the one who wanted to get married in the first place. I was teaching high school English, thought this would be my career, but I'd started to write. And then I was asked to give a few readings. Poems were published, manuscripts accepted. I quit my teaching job. What the hell? I had no husband, no children, nobody to take care of but me. I moved into a tiny apartment with a view of quiet hills. I set up my typewriter so I could see those hills and simply think as much as I needed to, and then write everything down just to see what those thoughts would look like on the page. I'd quit my teaching job in 1973. I worked 1 year for Poets in the Schools because of a grant from the Department of Labor to make poets employable. During 1973-74, because of that job, poets who are still my friends and creative companions came into my life. And then, after a year of substitute teaching, I was convinced to resign from the public school system forever. In 1975, I helped organize a National Women's Writer Conference at the Women's Building in Los Angeles. I made writer friends, opened myself to possibilities for a feminine approach to writing, autobiographical, imagistic, passionate, that I knew wasn't only feminine, but it was compelling to understand it that way. I'd come from a family in which women were educated, respected, so to see what seemed like the entire country become aware of women's rights, women's potential, women's creative intensity, that was thrilling. Pretty quickly, I figured out ways to teach creative writing to earn enough to live on. Early in the summer of 1976, I taught a 2-week intensive writing workshop which paid $1,500, exactly the amount I needed to take a trip to England and France. So I found myself in August traveling with my gay friends Gary, Jim, and Fred, who all spoke French, were willing to do the driving and organizing, could guide me. Here in the Chagall Museum, I let go of my earnestness, of my need to overcome the sad divorce, the impact of changing my life completely in order to write. I cried because for all certainty that I'd made the right changes for myself, I hadn't considered love that reflected Chagall's fullness of spirit, sweetness of soul. In these paintings, I could see what was missing. There wasn't a loving home inside of me, within my own heart. Here, I could see the possibilities for having both art and love. As I stood weeping, I noticed a museum guard, a man only a little older than I was, looking at me. He watched me cry. When he caught my eye, he smiled, a one side of the mouth French smile that usually means disdain. This smile, though, was understanding. I felt caught in what I thought was a purely private moment, but I felt less lonely, too. He evidently had seen what I'd seen in Chagall's work. I moved on to the chapel within the museum where Chagall's stained glass windows illuminated the space. I sat down. I'd stopped crying. Such blues in those windows, blues worthy of a heaven. Chagall had found this heaven, and he'd let me have some of it for an afternoon. For longer, really, a lot longer. It's been 37 years since that trip, but I still see my younger self in front of the Song of Songs, realizing how much beauty, how much love we can embrace through paint, through language, through the holiness of imagination, if we can just bring ourselves to bear it.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Holly. So out of Holly's class, I met our next reader, who is Sandra Sloss Giedeman. We call her Sandy. Sandy is a poet, short story writer, and past president of the Orange County chapter of PEN. I have to tell you that when I would hear her work in class, she was, I would say, when are we going to hear your complete collection? Because I need to hear each poem as part of the whole collection. Because each individual work is interesting, but without that overview, it was, I felt that would be a unifying theme. So thankfully she said, well, I have a manuscript ready. I'm like, let's go. Her work has appeared in various journals, including Poetry, the Cortland Review, and Critic. She's the winner of the Mudfish Poetry Prize awarded by Charles Simic and a Pushcart Prize nomination. She was also a finalist in the Salem College Poetry Competition. the Nob Hill Penn Women Literary Competition, the Mississippi Valley Poetry Competition, and the New Orleans Poetry Competition, judged by Andre Rescue. Thank you for rescuing me. An evening of her short stories was performed at the Beverly Hills New Short Fiction Series. She lives in Southern California. Sandra Sloss Giedeman.
I want to thank Catherine, my publisher. She's been such a great support getting this book out. I moved to California in my 20s and I fell in love with it. So a lot of my poetry is about California, and then some of it is about the Midwest where I grew up. So I'm going to start with 3 of my California poems. May gray, June gloom. June is a beach that smells of red tide, is water listlessly lapping at the sand, is a squadron of seagulls the color of fog, a marine lair. It will burn off by noon is our cliche, our hope for the sun, usually a given as our bougainvillea and jacaranda. We are aging white-bearded surfers in Hawaiian shirts printed with red hibiscus and the smell of fire rings. The sun, a barely noticed pink disk dipping into the Pacific. Then July with its white-hot sun, everything burned into a high relief, and fat lizards that scattered around my front door. It is hard to mark the passage of seasons for a transplant from elsewhere. Where are the snowsuits that reek of cedar and mothballs, rubber galoshes, mittens, earmuffs? Here's how perfect summer arrives. The mockingbird returns to sit atop the same telephone pole every year. He sings me awake and asleep, while the monkey's paw in my garden sends up its spindly mustard flowers to reach for the sun. Zack Lake, Santa Barbara. At dusk, bats fly, crossing paths, then fold like origami and cling to eaves. A carp breaks the water's surface, the sound of crickets his chorus. A great horned owl glides above an old man who fills mason jars with what he calls sacred mud of the healing lake. In the lobby of Faded Sun, I pass row after row of pinned butterflies under glass. Anise swallowtail, mournful dusky wing, cabbage white. Memento mori of this old hotel, long gone guests, days of green, and summer's sulfurous heat bursting cocoons. Fragile speckled wings that someone felt the need to pin down. You're awake as a child until they teach you the names of things. Visit to a California monastery. The wild artichokes are dry, with whiskers and faces bent like ancient ancestors of sunflowers. Olive trees, flower-tipped cacti, rusty barbed wire fence. I hear the birds as clearly as I once did in the Ozarks. The monk is old, with blue eyes unseemingly young. No clouds today, just open sky, oak savannas, and silence broken by the thunder of an F-18 training jet from Miramar. If I sit long enough, I think the ache will leave my bones. My shoulder will unlock, my jaw unclench. There's the dull tap of a woodpecker working one of the sycamores, the wild rude call of a jay. A row of million-dollar houses sit atop a ridgeline, visible behind a solitary century plant, its flowers turned to brown. The sun rolls in waves on my back, and the day is full of space. I think how that monk's eyes are young, but this canyon is old, once owned by coyotes, hawks, mountain lions, unseen rattlesnakes, recluses among the rocks and sage on this brilliant day. And then here's my Midwest poem. 210 Ford Victoria. My father had a knack, a special gift for buying cars that immediately became obsolete. The shiny green Hudson Hornet, the Henry J, the black Packard that looked like a mob car, the Mercury, big heavy thing with windows like gun turrets, a tank, an upside down bathtub. He loved his cars, and when he was young, he jazzed them up with special mud flaps. The last one I remember was the red Cadillac, a '59 with jutting tail fins that resembled weapons mounted on the rear. He always bought what he called Detroit Iron. Wasn't thrilled with my first car, British MG 1600. Would have preferred for me to buy the two-tone green and white Ford Victoria with chrome strips running down the side. He loved his cars as much as he loved Johnny Cash and Hank Williams. I thought that music maudlin. But years later, when country music came into vogue, I surprised myself when I knew all the lyrics to Orange Blossom Special and Ring of Fire.
Thank you, Sandy. So rumor has it Sandy has her next book almost ready for publication, so if you want to give her a little nudge, that would be great. Also in our class was Margaret Drewry Walsh, and Margaret and Sandy and I started a little cohort and meeting every other week for a while, and Margaret was very supportive and excited for Sandy and my books coming out, and we're like, well, where's yours? So I don't have anything for publication. So we kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and the result was this fantastic book, Room of the World Highway. Margaret Drewry Walsh has been published previously in Guideposts, Poetry Motel, JJ Journal, and Times 3. Her work has garnered attention from Calliope, the Journal of Women's Literature and Art, as well as Glimmer Train, where her short story Linkhorn Bay was awarded an honorable mention. For those of you that know it, that is no small feat. A former Los Angeles high school English teacher, she has taught writing at the Youth Policy Institute and the Los Angeles Police Department. Along with former school board president Roberta Weintraub, Walsh founded a writing and educational support program located at LAPD's Auman Recruit Training Center. Currently lives in the San Bernardino Mountains, and more importantly, she knows Wolfgang Puck. Margaret?
That was another life. So before I taught English, I worked for Wolfgang Puck for 17 years. That's why she says that. Well, thank you, Kathleen, for this, and thank you for everybody coming. This is really a thrill. I thought I'd start, we were talking about Holly, I'd start with a poem I wrote some time ago about Mariposa Avenue, which is where, for decades, we all met. And this poem came after a teaching one day with some Armenian students, and then our discussions there. And so it's titled Mariposa Avenue. Talk is not cheap here. Our one-syllable words, love, life, work, art, death, these words have cost people their lives. But tonight we are safe, the conversation spirited. One woman reads her work aloud, then another, and so on. I can't help but notice the cat's sharp claws playing with a pen, and Akhmatova's complete works in the bookshelf, and the barred city windows at my right, while someone recommends a just-seen movie about a jailed, now dead poet. Outside sounds of the Armenian neighborhood prompt me to remember in 1917, Armenian writers were executed. What happened to all their stories? Do the dead continue to write for us? The room is overly warm despite a cold snap. I shiver anyway at the fragility of my good fortune. Everything tonight conspires to remind me, wherever there is wisdom, someone has died. This next poem I published, and the publisher asked me to take out the word veil. So I'll read it and let you think what you think about it. He thought it was too controversial. I mean it metaphorically, so, and I did not change it, but here it is. The question must be posed just right. The scandal of her ankle exposed. I can't help thinking about what the world would be like if centuries of women lined up, women gathered deep into the horizon, and if at once they all threw down their veils, all those sunless limbs, cashmere skins. Remember when the curved line of the earth was found? Outside my office window, 2 camellia bushes bloom red and rich. The neighbor's grapefruit tree, curves of yellow fruit, veils and fruit and limbs, the morning cold and gray, but ripe for wondering, what veil, what veil? So I moved up into the San Bernardino Mountains, and I actually live in a forest. And so this, a lot of my poetry has to do with being up there. Of all the forest trees outside my window, the sugar pine to my left, the one I think of as the liveliest because it sways the most, today stands still. Did you know that right before they die, trees in distress call out and send whatever food they have left to other trees? My pine is pale and spindly, barely spared from 3 years' drought. This winter is wet, so I believe it stands silently and sends no final food. But even in the forest, fate is capricious. A nearby fir will be dead by spring. There is no moral here, just what science has revealed, the suffering and generosity of trees. And before I moved up there, I lived in the Chatsworth area, and I don't know if you've been back where the old Roy Rogers Ranch is. There's a lot of hiking in there. I used to hike there regularly. A hike in the old Roy Rogers Ranch. In this November heat, I fear rattlesnakes, but instead of snakes, 12 peacocks make their way, as I do, out of the bordering backcountry, into this quiet suburban neighborhood. Most congregate under the Pacific live oak, whose knobbed limbs appear to reach out from centuries into this very evening. But 3 crested males perch on a roof's peak. A 4th commands the street. His tail feathers trail like a coronation robe. The quattro watch over the small flock, gray peahens, their babies, and the one albino. How grateful I am for this solemn nightly homecoming, these azure-necked apostles made more numinous by the refracted light. I dream of molting, 1. But in the morning I'm in the same old skin, colorless, limp, straining for release. In my garden, a hummingbird dazzles. New greens proliferate. Seed pods lie split, inert beside the beans which curl and climb confidently, oh so perky in their new world. And here I am, same old, mired, constrained, flicking caterpillars from young leaves. 2. I buy a rubber snake, the color of basil, its forked tongue and fangs perpetually exposed. Near the Madonna, I stretch it across the sill. Ants no longer nest there. 3. Poison. 4. In the park, wild mustard grows tall, tender. Across the road, a pond and sycamore tree, where snowy egrets gather like magnolia blossoms. 2 peacocks screech while children peck. I walk down Trigger Street and Dale Lane, low back through telescoping boulders, watch night sky rise, sunset lower. This loop through mustard, egrets, boulders, satin sky, sandstone landscape. What is seeking to be healed? 5. Is a snake. 6. Rub against solid rock. Start with the mouth. Remember something. New is underneath. This day, in my garden, a red-headed hummingbird prods the lemon tree. Overhead ducks flock. My inbox message reads, penetrating the darkness, the wisdom of the owl. Evening and the blackbirds return to roost. Hundreds of dark wings, so low I can hear air and bones and feathers. Their husky bird voices, intimate and slow. Prompt me to remember Icarus. Don't fly too high, make a nest, preen feathers, hunt even in darkness. All day these fluttering wings and my pen across the page, making food of worms. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. So we noticed these beautiful have been worked on by our resident book designer, who's Andrea Ryder. Would you stand up so we can all? Really grateful to have you on our team. And you should follow her on Facebook because she posts these gorgeous photos of hummingbirds. Amazing. So we also published Cynthia Gregory's book, which is Journaling as a Sacred Practice. She couldn't be here today. In the house, we also have a couple other esteemed poets who are well known in the Los Angeles literary scene. And one of them is Laurel Ann Bogan. And I haven't personally taken a workshop from her. It's on my list of things to do, it's on my bucket list. But as I told one of her students today, to have read one of Laurel Ann's poems is to be her student. It's amazing, amazingly moving work. Thank you, Laurel Ann. And so Laurel Ann also has a Christmas party, and I was invited to go a couple of years ago, and there was able to meet someone whose work I'd also admired, Jerry Garcia. And I also admired the other Jerry Garcia so much, so it was very wonderful to meet Jerry and then talk with him about publishing his new book on Summer Solstice Road. So it's really a pleasure for us at Green Tara to be able to have Jerry amongst our authors. So Jerry, if you'd come up, and we'd love to hear some of your work.
Poetry audiences are always very patient. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Catherine and Andrea, for helping me get this book out. Beautiful typesetting work that Andrea did, and the cover work. I did the cover, but Andrea made it all work. Also, want to mention a couple other people in the audience. One of the reasons I'm here is because in 1998, Laurel Ann Bogan accepted me into her master class. And, she's been a great influence. A lot of these poems that I'm going to read did start with her. Marie Leclermain is here, and if you don't know her, she publishes Poetic Diversity, and she always, Marie, I'm sorry because at my age time compresses, so it was either you or Rick Luker who were the first person to publish me. Thank you for that. Let's see, here we go. A lot of these poems in my book are based in LA because I am an LA native. This poem is called At the Grove. Ghosts sell produce from the backs of Studebakers. Phantom children race miniature cars like it was 1954 on the asphalt parking lot covering what is left of its former track. On 3rd and Fairfax in Los Angeles, fountains boogie onto cobblestones. It's like Vegas with a trolley car. Land of Gilmore, where Earl Gilmore displayed the famous Red Lion logo of South Pump Gaseterias. Home to LA baseball, the Hollywood Stars, the available team, the team you saw with your older brother. I strain to hear the crack of runs batted in, whistles and shrills of public address. Announcers roar, "It's out of here!" Umpire barking, "Safe!" But generations of concrete bury that old green field. Consumers lurch from parking structures to a pretend Main Street of corporate coffee houses and Oprah's book club, where mimes and security guards smother memories. A dizzied surround sound moviegoers disgorge the movieplex. I shake my head, not the old drive-in theater, not where families hid under blankets to avoid additional charge. Not where teenagers groped their first sex, not little racers burning up the tracks, not ball players sliding through innings. Now it's children sliding past frames of lingerie, designer Hawaiian shirts, and cubic zirconium. They look for glittered gumballs and new electronic controls. I look for passage back through maintenance, access, and service alleys, seeking that forgotten field of summer play, past the parking lot produce and lanky players that stretch and glide for the little guys with dirty faces to cheer and play the maracas of Cracker Jack boxes. Kids and visitors do not hear those echoes. Smoking immigrant dishwashers frown at the off-tune karaoke singers. I glare at my daughter's cotton candy smile and ask her, "You call this a good time?" It's time for something to happen. Okay. The Great Western Fair. Most had never seen cows, touched a pen of swine, nor smelled the organic bouquet of rural life. A yellow bus ride to the traveling country fair unlocked the minds of uninitiated 9-year-olds far from their city limits. Among the flying flags, costume guides, and asphalt covered with green hay, the animal looked kind, though shackled in chain link fences. Thank you, Richard, for giving me this water, which I obviously couldn't carry. If you want to read some really wonderful stories about beyond Baroque, Harry Northup, Holly's husband, has a website. It's called 3x3.com. I'm not sure how to find it. Maybe times three. And he solicited a bunch of people to write about their memories of beyond Baroque, and there's some great stories in there. Top Gun mythology. Daedalus touched down at the drive-in for a burger, shake, and fries. Skating waitresses looked askance as he begged slick son Icarus to make good use of his feathers. The guys jeered their waxed-up friend as he obediently flapped his wings to follow father's departure. Soon, like Maverick chasing Viper, Icarus soared past cruising altitude. Daedalus flew steady. Icarus climbed and rotated, top-gunning his way to the stars. Dad wished Icarus were more concerned about safety than looking cool. "Where are you going, son?" "Just one more high, Dad," Icarus shouted as he climbed towards the searing sun. Daedalus didn't curse his plummeting son's arrogance. After all, he had given the boy his wings. And I'm just going to close with the title, Home on Summer Solstice Road. It's a poem I started a long time ago in Laurel Ann Bogan's class, and it just means more to me every time I read it now. On Summer Solstice Road, we beg the air for moisture, drink bottled rations promised to the next mile, and try to soothe the grief of scorched limbs, blistered feet. Sand-blasted panoramas, degrading paths, and broken posts discourage our journey. Silt, sage wilts, cactus stoops, power lines corrode, humor fails. The wheeze grows heavy, our vision strains, knees seize like rusting gates, sheer sand dunes snicker at the chaos. Sweat may as well be blood, streaks on rocks and bones, artifacts crushed to gravel by the heavy-footed compression of many generations. We look for better horizons, but nothing protects us from the unforgiving greed of a prolonged summering sun. We rupture and collapse from futile attempts to rebuild our dried out oases. Not even the stalwart yucca stands a chance against quixotic winds from what might be giants. Thank you.
Beautiful work. Thank you, Jerry. Our next author is Bob Alonzi. And some 30-odd years ago, I was involved in the human potential movement, and I read about Rolfing, which is a series of, oh, Bob, you can come up and correct me afterwards. It's a series of, it's a type of body work that corrects long-term misalignments in your body. And at the time, they had a reputation for being excruciatingly painful, and for some reason, I still wanted to do it. And I went and met Bob, and it was a wonderful experience. And before and after pictures of how your posture looks when you start, and then how you look when you end. And I still have those pictures and get them out once in a while. So that's Bob's day job. And one day on Facebook, since we've been connected on Facebook, he had written a post, and I wrote to him, I said, Bob, you are a wonderful writer. Have you thought about writing a book? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, I have a book. So we're thrilled to publish it. If you check it out in the bookstore, it has the most amazing drawings. Actually, would you mind showing us the drawing on your t-shirt?
I sure will.
These are the, so it's a stretch and strengthen book that you can carry with you. It's like the minimum, who's in favor of this? The minimum exercise you need to do. Stay in shape. So and it has these beautiful line drawings and
Fumble around.
and Bob put this book together for all of us. So Bob's going to come up and read to us, and Bob Alonzi.
You know, we've had some wonderful poetry here, and what poetry reminds me of is it's sort of music of the language, which, you know, it's special because it affects us and it takes us right to our hearts. The book I've assembled is kind of to help us go to the poetry of our bodies. You know, the kinesthetic experience, the feeling states, whether they are simply muscle fatigue or how good we feel to how good or maybe how not so good we are feeling emotionally. And it's really important that we integrate all aspects of who we are and ourselves, and part of it is through physical activity. So I'm going to read a few things which are not so poetic, but it kind of takes us to some basic concepts that I feel are really important when dealing with who we are as a whole. There are 4 basic concepts I believe are essential for physical health: mobility, flexibility, strength, and proprioception. Mobility is the proficiency to move the body. Flexibility is the capacity to bend and adapt to positions. Strength is physical power and degrees of intensity. Proprioception is the facility to sense the position and location of the body in time and space. The way I see these concepts for exercise is to understand that they all work together to enhance performance and stability. When one of these key factors is missing or minimized, there is greater potential for an imbalance in the human structure and less than optimal physical performance. With an imbalance, there is a greater likelihood for injury and chronic muscular and skeletal conditions to occur. My clients have told me that starting an exercise routine was hard and tiring. But later on, once exercise became a part of their routine, they would describe how good they felt physically and emotionally. This is because physical activity stimulates a release of neurochemicals that enhance mood. Dopamine is one, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. 4 of the body's chemicals that are neurotransmitters that enhance a pleasure response and improved emotional outlook. More, exercise helps reduce stress and tension. Physical activity helps the body relax, and improves sleep, and quality sleep is how the body repairs itself and recovers to grow stronger. A system of exercise, as a system of exercise, each exercise builds upon the next and the next. The eye warm-up, well, let me just intervene here and say that the section is, the book is broken into three key sections. One is a warm-up program, one is a stretching program, and one is a strengthening program. In a way, you can't do one without the other and maintain good physical health. They all are integrated as part of a whole. And as Catherine mentioned, this doesn't take you a long time. It's simple. So as I was going to read, as a system of exercise, each exercise builds upon the next and the next. The eye warm-up routine prepares the body for the following exercises. The eye stretch set improves flexibility and mobility and makes the body more adaptable to varying kinds of movement and activities. And the last phase, eye strengthen, challenges muscular capacity to enhance strength and proprioception. It's also the phase where the body will produce more neurochemicals, feelings of well-being, less discomfort from physical challenge, and improved emotional outlook. So I'm going to read a little bit from my epilogue. And through a lifetime of loving to be physically active, I have learned as we go through life's varying phases that our interests, needs, and physical abilities mirror the stage of life we occupy. Each decade we traverse, we learn how our bodies shift to accommodate our physical, emotional, and spiritual gifts. This is all a part of our personal evolution, and the constant in our lives is ever-present change. And finally, eye strength and strength can be used as a guide and a beginning for learning more about your body. A heightened awareness of your body is a step closer to the larger understanding of self-awareness, personal growth, and insight. The human body, psyche, spirit, and structure are all connected. So when one aspect of self is neglected, the other parts fall prey to imbalance, illness, and injury. Through caring for the body's physical and emotional needs, one's good health will provide vitality and the opportunity to live a passionate life. So thank you.
And I have a novel that's going to be finished someday that I've been working on since 2001. And I have had 50 rejections, which I've told is not bad. And the last rejection said, I think this novel could be big. You need to totally rewrite it, however. So in the meantime, I decided to do some work. My day job is I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm in private practice in Los Angeles. So I was doing some promotional type writing for my business and self-help kinds of things. And so this book came as a collection of short articles. I started writing these short articles. I was actually hired by Sex.com. Who knew there was a Sex.com? I didn't, but they contacted me one day and asked me if they wanted to, at the time they weren't just a porn site, they wanted to have some legitimate writers writing about sex and health and so on. And there was another PhD on the site, so I thought, well, I'll be in good company. And I started writing these short articles for them, and I found that this 400-word essay was actually quite interesting. Sort of like gave me like, I think it was like, sort of like writing a sonnet. Like you have this this puzzle to unwrap while you're writing. So I wrote 100 short pieces like that, and I collected them here. So this is a great book for people with a modern attention span. You don't have to commit to reading a book. You can just sit down and read a little thing and then send a text back. So I'll read you one piece from this. It's called Personal Growth and the Ostrich Egg. It was hot that summer, hotter than 4 kids from the chilly Pacific Northwest could comprehend. Our dad had gotten a math scholarship for 6 weeks in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. So he and Mom had piled all of his kids into the Volkswagen van and headed off cross-country to a planet very unlike our own. It was way too hot to play outside, so every day we escaped to the air-conditioned shopping center across the street. Malls were not yet ubiquitous. They seemed jammed full of mystical treasures. And our parents let us go over unchaperoned. The immensity of this freedom was almost inconceivable to us. The most magical treat of all was right inside the front door, an aquarium that held 6 chicken eggs and a gigantic 4-pounder from an ostrich. Listed on the pedestal below were the dates they were expected to hatch. It was only a matter of weeks, but in the time frame of children, forever. We waited every single day that summer for those eggs to hatch, and every single day we would run over to the mall to see if it was time yet. Waiting, waiting, we waited, and not too patiently. The ostrich egg turned out to be a dud, but every one of us, my brothers and sister and I, remember the best day of the summer as the one when we arrived and the chickens were finally hatching. We city kids watched the natural miracle as they pecked their way out of their shells, wet and squeaking. We found out it wasn't all sanitized, Disney-fied, as we've been led to expect, by the cartoons where adorable baby chicks burst out of their shells spotless and downy. It took untold effort for them to facilitate their own births, and one chick was bloody from being cut by its shell. I often recount this story for my patients who are grappling with why it all hurts so much. The way of personal and spiritual growth takes untold effort and is often bloody. It doesn't just spring out fully formed because you say a few affirmations or read shelves of self-help books. It's a painful process. There's no two ways about it. Quote, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that uncloses your understanding," Khalil Gibran wrote. Just as in the birth process of the chicks, the pain and struggle involved in the birthing of oneself is not an aberration, but the most natural thing in the world. Then I wrote, I wrote this book, and then I, through my own single life, so I was a licensed marriage and family therapist, but I had 2 failed marriages, and my dating life was disastrous, so I set out to master the dating process. And I had experiences early living in an ashram in India where things were much different, how men and women met each other. And so I was trying to reconcile the tantric way of meeting with Western online dating, which couldn't be 2 far opposite extremes. So I worked on it for 3.5 years, met my true love, and I thought maybe that could help some other people. So I wrote this little book on tantric dating. I've been asked to speak on it quite a few places around town. So if you're interested, if you're single and suffering, as I was, you might like this book. This is a little meditation exercise in the back of this book. I thought I'd read. It's called "The Perfect Beloved in This Moment." You've heard it many times. Truth is in the present moment. The past is made up of memories which are not always accurate, as you may have experienced, and the future hasn't happened yet, so it's all conjecture. Sandwiched in between stands the present moment as the only reality. I had an overwhelming experience of this sitting quietly at the burning ghats, the place where Indians burn their dead. I like to go sit there and gaze out at the river with the cows, cow herds, and women washing colorful fabrics on the banks. The sun was shining overhead with only a few clouds, the sounds of life murmuring far away from this temple of death, the air rich and pungent as it is in India. Suddenly an awareness shot up my spine. All is perfect exactly as it is. It filled my body with a streaming vibration for I don't know how long. An actual, tangible experience, not something I read in a book or idle thoughts of the mind. My life changed forever. If it's true that everything's perfect in the present moment, love must be here too. If I'm not aware of it, My mind and my prejudices are keeping me from knowing. If the present moment is perfect, any person I am with is the perfect beloved in this moment. Not necessarily the next moment, or month, or a year from now, but who really knows? Practice seeing whomever you're with in this moment as your perfect beloved. If you're sitting at the coffee bean and a 50-year-old man is sitting next to you, practice saying silently to yourself, this is my perfect beloved in this moment. If you're receiving a massage and enjoying the stranger's hand caressing your body, say to yourself, this is my lover in this moment. If you're on a date and not feeling attracted, you don't have to be to do this exercise. Say to yourself, in this moment, this is where love is. It is up to me in this moment whether I recognize love or not. Everything is perfect in the present moment. This person is my perfect beloved in this moment. This is my lover in this moment. In this moment, this is where love is. It is up to me in this moment whether I recognize love or not. Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to say that the books are all available in the bookstore, everybody's books, and 50% of that is a donation to Beyond Baroque, which we're all happy to do. So please support Beyond Baroque and our authors. I just want to say for the future, we have coming up a new book from Sandy. Bob sent me an idea for a book. I'm like, definitely we want to read that book, so please give him nudges too. And I'm going to finish that novel. Okay, thanks a lot.